Oh my gosh.
Hi there.
Hello. Kelsey
Hello.
Green.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Charlie, Ovia, Sarah, Amy, Devin. I'm just gonna let everybody come in and then we can start. Okay. So our first guest, Rick Mercer, you might know him from the Rick Mercer report. He's here with us. Rick, thank you so much for being here.
It's wonderful to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. I can
Excellent.
hear you perfectly. Great. So we're going to start with how did you start acting?
I joined the drama club, like so many people, and I joined the drama club and I wasn't prepared to go on stage. I didn't think that that was something I wanted to do. I had done some public speaking and stuff, but I couldn't really see myself in a scene doing so I didn't. And I didn't like the play. I didn't like the play very much at all. I was working backstage and I was going to quit the drama club. And Lois Brown, who's a Newfoundland actor, and at the time was my drama teacher, she said, oh, if you quit the drama club, it'll be a terrible mistake. You could regret it for the rest of your life. And I thought, well, this is a little hysterical. Like, I'm going to drop a extracurricular activity. How could that be a bad thing? Who cares? I've dropped dozens of them before. And I said, why? And she said, the next play is very important because it's going to the drama festival. And I said, well, what's the play? And she said, I don't know. You haven't written it yet. And that's probably one of the moments that changed my life for the better. It's probably the greatest moment of my life in many ways, because I thought, okay, I'll write your bloody play. And she put me in a room with a bunch of other students and we wrote this play together. And we won at the regional drama festival. And from there, we created a comedy troupe, because we thought, you kind of just look at, the people who came before you, and we thought, okay, Codco has a TV show, so we'll get a comedy troupe, and then we'll go to Toronto, and then we'll do a show at a bar called the Rivoli, and Lorne Michaels from Saturday Night Live will come see us, and then we'll get a TV show, because that's what Kids in the Hall did. So that was what we were thinking of doing, and we just kept creating and writing and creating and writing, and from that moment on, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a creator.
That's awesome. That is really awesome. I also wanted to ask you, when did you make the leap into television? I know you worked for the CBC.
I never worked for the CBC, but I worked for shows that were on the CBC. But I would like to back up a little bit, because when I had a comedy, because I think it's relevant to the students watching, when we were in high school, and I don't know if we were in high school or if it was the year after high school, we had the comedy troupe. I always loved the idea of television, but you can't just start making television. But we found out you can start making films. And now it's easier than ever. I don't want to be an old man and say, my day was hard to make a film, but it was a bit trickier. But there was NIFCO, the Newfoundland Independent Filmmakers Cooperative, and they're one of the sponsors of this film festival. And once again, I stand on the backs of giants, because people like Paul Pope, who put this entire festival together, he created NIFCO along with his brother and many other people, but they created it because it wasn't there. By the time we came along, it was there. And we wanted to make short films, and they said, that's our mandate. And they let us in, and they gave us equipment, and they helped us out. We had to fundraise a little bit because you had to get film developed and stuff, but we started making short films. And one, we entered into the Atlantic Film Festival, it did very well. And others, and we would play them during our shows. And I love that. I love being backstage, seeing the film play. And it was an old-fashioned film on a projector, but seeing the film play and getting the laughs and going, wow, this is what I want to do. I want to do, I guess, TV. But we started out making short films, which is what this festival is all about.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'll get back to you on more questions about the festival. I wanted to move to you, Veronica. Veronica Dymond. Dymond, am I saying it correctly?
Dymond, yep.
Perfect. Well, Veronica, you are a writer and a cartoonist. I wanted to ask you, you directed an episode, right, on the children's TV show, Tales from the Floordrobe. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
English is not my language. Um, so how was it like? How did you prepare for that role?
Well, first of all, floordrobe isn't an English word at all, so you did perfectly on that. It's amazing.
Thanks.
Fantastic. So I found directing Tales from the Floordrobe this year really, really fun, but also it had its challenges. COVID has made everything a lot more challenging when you're talking about filmmaking or TV or anything like that. Floordrobe was actually the first time I directed anything television, and it was the largest production that I've ever worked on. So it was really, really exciting. I worked with a lot of very talented people, and that was just so fun, and I learned so much. To prepare for it, I did a lot of research. It's a lot of work to direct something to that scale, right? But a lot of the films that I had done prior were things that I had written before, and so in writing it, I knew what I wanted to shoot, and that made it easier. This was taking somebody else's script, and I had to sort of conceptualize what I wanted it to look like. So I just used my cartooning skills to draw out storyboards for what I wanted each shot to look like, and that definitely helped me carry through on my vision. It was a lot of fun to be able to think about creative ways to use lighting and use shots and transitions and things like that. Yeah, it was lots of fun.
That's really cool. So you used cartoon. You're basically draw the scenes that you wanted to direct.
Yeah, and that is actually something that's done commonly in filmmaking. It's usually called storyboarding. Mm-hmm. And you draw out what you want each shot to look like and different transitions. And that cuts down on cost when you're actually shooting on the day, because if you are shooting, cost and time, right? Everything about television is time. Often run out of time at the end of a day. At least I found that we often ran out of time on the end of a day of a film shoot or a TV shoot. But if you know exactly what shots you want to get and how to move from each shot, that definitely helps you set up the camera faster and set up the lighting faster and figure out how you want your actors to move. And it helps when you get to the editing process of how to put all of the footage that you've captured into the proper format.
And how did you get included with filmmaking?
Oh, geez, that's a strange story. So I mostly am in town known as a stand-up comedian. I did a lot of writing for my own stand-up comedy. But I've also written plays and I've written sketches, and I just had a real interest in film. I did a couple of courses with, as Rick mentioned, NIFCO. NIFCO has a lot of great film courses. So I've done some courses with NIFCO. I've gone and attended a lot of workshops that the Nickel Film Festival puts off, that the St. John's International Women's Film Festival puts off. There are plenty of courses and workshops that people put off in Newfoundland every year, and a lot of them increasingly are online. So they're really good to access. That's a really great resource for learning about filmmaking, and then also meeting people and chatting with people who will help you make films who are interested in you writing or directing your film. So I kind of still can't really believe that I work sometimes in film, because it mostly it happened due to my writing and just meeting people through my writing. But I'm really fortunate and really happy that I get to work in it, because film is just such a dynamic and interesting industry.
That is so beautiful. Thank you, Veronica. Rick, I want to go back to you. What advice would you give to students who want to rent like Rick?
It's the same advice I'd give to anyone who is making a short film or wanting to create a rant, is commit to doing it and do it, and know that it mightn't work out, because we learn from our failures. No one starts knocking it out of the park right out of the gate. That just doesn't happen. And so if you want to make a short film, if you want to make a rant, all I can assure you is the second one is going to be better than the first one, but you got to get that first one done. if you're talking specifically about a rant, I can tell you a few things. You have to, first of all, it's they should be no longer than 90 seconds. And the way I would do it, I would write what it is I wanted to say, and it could be 2 pages, 3 pages, 5 pages, 6 pages. Then I would start reducing it, because the 90 seconds is key. So it has to be something, your point of view has to be something that can be illustrated in 90 seconds. Then when you have that, you have to start learning it, and you've got to learn it cold. You have to have it completely cold. You have to be able to look directly into the camera like this the entire time and never be caught searching for your words, never, get caught like looking over here when you should just keep looking into the camera. And then you have to find someone to shoot it who is incredibly committed to walking backwards and not killing themselves. And that is actually perhaps the most important part. And then you start rehearsing it together without the camera, even though my cameraman would have a 45-pound camera. You guys will probably have a much lighter camera, but still rehearse without the camera, and you rehearse the words and the motion with the camera operator. The camera operator is as important as the performer. And again, they're doing it backwards. So it takes a bit of rehearsal. And then you start shooting it. And you shoot it and you shoot it and you shoot it. And if there's any moments where you're reaching for words or you lose eye contact with your audience, you stop and you start over again. That's how you do a rant.
And what would you say is your favorite rant?
There's been a lot of rants. I ranted for
yeah.
28 years. There's been some favorite ones. There were ones that I just thought were really pure funny and were so knocked it out of the park on that level, because I always liked it when a rant was funny. Sometimes, because I was fortunate enough to be ranting on television with a pretty big audience, I would move the needle on an issue, and that was really exciting. There was this horrible politician named Roseanne Scopes, who got elected as a liberal when we were on This Hour's 22 Minutes, and she was revealed to be a very virulently anti-gay individual. And there was rumors that Gretchen might throw her out of caucus, but they didn't want to go that far. And one day I wrote what I thought was the perfect rant, and it really illustrated how awful she was. And she was soon after removed from caucus. I don't know if I had an impact, but I like to think I gave her a nudge out of caucus, and her political career came to an end. There were rants about bullying that I felt helped a national conversation about bullying after a young man by the name of Jamie Hubley died in Ottawa as a result of suicide, that I was very proud of, even though there were no jokes in it, obviously, because the subject matter didn't lend it to that. So there's been a lot of different rants over the years. It was the part of the show that the Mercer Report that I was always the most proud of, and the one that I would never take my foot off the gas on. Occasionally, I'm embarrassed to admit, occasionally you go, okay, that's good enough when you're doing something, but I never ever went, oh, that's good enough if it's when it came to the rants. And if the rants aren't good or they're not up to par, it's not for lack of trying, because I always put it all on the page and on the screen when it came to the rants.
That's beautiful. Actually, I kind of want to ask you, I mean, for many of the students here, their films are going to be the first time they're doing a film. So if you have things like your identity or the things that you believe in, what do you think will be the best way to put your values in your film? How would you tell them the best way to do that?
Well, when it comes to rants, if you're using my rants as a baseline, they're all about point of view. They are public commentary. So you have to have a point of view. If you're making a short film, don't feel like you have to be engaged in social commentary. You can just be making a silly film, or you can be making a horror film, or there's lots of things that you can do. Don't feel like you have to make some great social commentary. Also, even when it comes to a rant, yes, you could talk about an issue that you might think is the issue of the ages. You might want to tackle something like climate change, but you also might want to tackle people who don't use their signal light, or people who block the escalator. Like it doesn't have to be heavy by any stretch. And sometimes it can just be funny. It can just be your point of view. So don't get bogged down thinking that you have to make some great point. And again, I cannot emphasize enough for first-time filmmakers, embrace the failure that may occur, because I can assure you it's harder than it looks, but it's rewarding. It's more rewarding than you can ever imagine, and it's worth it. And it's like anything else. You know, you're not going to hop on a bike and nail it out of the gate. You're going to crash a few times, and that's what makes learning how to ride a bike so great. And that's why this festival is so great.
Awesome, Rick. Would you kind of share with us, because you really do talk with conviction about dealing with failure. Can you tell us, how do you deal when you have setbacks? What do you tell yourself? How do you pick yourself back up?
Well, in show business, there's two kinds of failures. There's always the people don't like that. They don't find it funny, or they find it boring, or they just don't like it. That's a terrible feeling, because it means you failed, because you know, you obviously set out to be funny, or you set out to make a certain point, or what have you. And then there's also the critical response. Sometimes people say, they criticize your work, and you feel that the work is good. They criticize the work. I'm very lucky. I have a very thick skin. I've had lots of great reviews in my life, but I've had incredibly bad reviews. Everyone on this call is too young to remember, but my big break happened when I did a one-person show in Ottawa, and it was getting a lot of attention, and so much so that when the theater critic for CBC Radio decided he was going to go to this small theater that I was playing, it was a big deal, because this guy was a big muckety muck, and he'd never gone to this alternative 60-seat theater that I was playing in. So the crowd at CBC St. John's, when they heard this, they actually arranged for the critics' review to be aired on the morning show in St. John's, even though the play wasn't in St. John's, because everyone was talking about Mercer's up there doing this play. And the critic came on and he said, the announcer said, so-and-so's here, he's going to review Rick Mercer's one-man show. And the critic said, I'm not reviewing Mr. Mercer's one-man show. And the host said, well, you said you went and you're here to review it. He said, no, I've decided to read an open letter to Mr. Mercer. And this was on the morning show in St. John's. He said, Mr. Mercer, show me the button, I'll push it, is not a play. You are not a playwright. Leave the theater. You have nothing to offer. And that was the entire review. It was perhaps the shortest and the worst review in the history of Canadian theater. And you know what? Honestly, I didn't care, because I really liked the show and I was proud of it. And I thought, the hell with this guy, I don't care. And it was water off a duck's back. Now, when it comes, if someone I trust has a legitimate criticism, I will take that criticism and I will respond to it, and I'll change my act if need be. I'm not saying I don't pay attention to criticism, but you have to have a thick skin. Got to have a thick skin. And sometimes your stuff doesn't work legit, and there's nothing you can do about that. You just got to say, well, maybe you like the next thing.
That's awesome. Veronica, I want to move to you. Kind of like the same question. I mean, how did you deal with this process of getting into the film industry and, you know, getting in there and dealing with any failure, setbacks?
I mean, Rick said a lot of great things. Yeah, what a talent that everybody has to be able to listen to Rick Mercer talk. What an opportunity. How do I deal with it? So when I do stand-up comedy, because that's the world that I primarily came from, you get an instantaneous reaction on whether or not people like what you are doing. If you tell a joke and they don't laugh, you know it and you feel it in your gut. And it's not a great feeling, but you do just have to move on from it. Every time you do something and it doesn't work out, you can't just sit in it. You can't think, oh gosh, you know, like repeat it over and over in your head. You've just got to move on to the next thing. And it's it's not usually a forever issue, because there will be something else down the pipeline that you can work on. And yeah, not every joke that you make is going to land. Not every observation that you have is going to be what you want. But most of the time, if you're proud of what you do, and if you put in your best effort, all you can say is, well, you know, I did that, I tried it, didn't work, let's move on. It helps a lot to have good people around you who can support you and remind you that, you know, even if you made a big mistake or something didn't work out, that it's not the end of the world. And I would always listen to legitimate criticisms, because I find that a lot of insights that I hear from people that I trust, my friends, my co-writers, and other people in my life who I listen to, they have great ideas, they'll have great insights, and it's useful to be able to improve based off of criticism that is looking to help you, but criticism that is looking just to tear you down or make fun of you, like, I don't know, what's the point? That just seems mean, and I have no time for it, and I kind of ignore that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we do have some questions from our chat, so I'm just going to ask both of you. What's your biggest motivator? Let's start with you, Rick.
Lots of different things motivate me. I love the entertainment business. I love knowing I'm entertaining an audience. That's a big motivator. Sometimes when it comes to the rants, for example, I'm motivated by a point I would like to make, but that's kind of different because that's kind of the job of a political commentator, and I've merged the two worlds. But basically, it's entertaining an audience. That's the big one. Also, there's more, there's basic motivations, like I want to keep working, I want to make a living, and it's not an easy racket to make a living in. So there's that as well. That's a bit mercenary, but it's true. There's many things. I want to do a good job. I really want to do a good job. I just wrote this book, and it was something that I'd never done before. It was long form. I'd never done that before. And I really was motivated by doing a good job. And I had a contract. So even if I did a bad job, it would have all worked out the same from a financial point of view or whatever. But I just wanted to do a good job. And I guess I also want to keep challenging myself. I went on a stand-up comedy tour when I was 50. And I've never really been a stand-up comic. I've stood on stage and done stand-up for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and I've hosted lots of things. I've done that my entire career. But I've never gone out there with a microphone for 20 minutes at a time and done full sets. And I decided at 50 I was going to do it. And the way I motivated myself was I agreed to go on this tour with Just for Laughs. And I knew, and this is a great thing about show business, that on Tuesday at 8 o'clock or whatever the opening night is, the curtain is going to rise at 8 o'clock, and you're either going to be prepared or you're going to be not prepared. And if you're prepared, there's a chance it could be a great experience. But if you're not prepared, there's only one outcome, and it's very, very bad. So yeah, I like to challenge myself.
What about you, Veronica? What is a motivation for you?
Deadlines are a big motivation for me. If has said, I want you to produce this thing by this time, then I'll get to work on it. I find a lot of joy in trying new things, in trying to learn a new art form, or in trying to figure out something that I haven't done before in something that I've done. Like, maybe I've done a film, but I haven't really had the chance to play with lighting. So I really want to do that. And that will help me work through some of the more difficult aspects of whatever I'm working on. I also love entertaining people. The sound of people's laughter when you've made it, oh man, what a rush, what a thrill to get off stage and still have people laughing and clapping for you. Just an unbelievable feeling. So that's just great to be able to do that. And also to be able to look back, a lot of, especially we're talking about film primarily here, with film, it's such a long process, writing a film or a TV episode, and then shooting it, and then editing it. And then often you don't actually even get to see people's reactions to it because they're watching it on YouTube, or they're watching it online, or they're watching it, in some festival that you're not attending. So it can be a little bit hard sometimes to think, oh, I'm putting in all this effort for something and I can't get that immediate rush, that immediate feeling of seeing people's reactions. But I will look at the things that I have produced, my short films or like parody videos that I've done, things like that. And I just feel proud about what I was able to accomplish with whatever limitations I had. And that's just really nice to be able to look back and say, I made that, I put my best into it. And maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it's not universally beloved, but I worked really hard for that and I'm proud of it. And I'm proud of the work that other people did. That's a great feeling too.
That's awesome. Let's move to the next question. Madison said, I read a lot of fiction and this will be my first time making a film. How do you approach an adaptation of a piece of literature, like short stories, for example? Let's continue with you, Veronica. What do you think?
Ooh, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever adapted a short story, but I think that I would look at, so film versus like a literary format. Film is very visual, right? Mm-hmm. It's all about what you see, and literature is reading stuff. So I would look at what are the interesting visuals in your story. Maybe even how could I tell this story if there was no dialogue at all? How could I tell this story visually using only pictures? And I'm not saying don't use dialogue. Dialogue is wonderful. Dialogue is beautiful. And often it's kind of a little bit weird if you have a character and deliberately they're not speaking. So do use dialogue, but think about the visuals. How can I make this look really interesting? How can I tell this story using the art of cinema, the visual art of cinema? Maybe go from there. And then once you've got that sort of in your mind, think about the scenes between the characters and how they're reacting to each other or to what's happening. But film is a very visual medium, so you're going to want to focus more on what you see in the image rather than just blocks of text.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. What about you, Rick? How do you think is the best way to adapt a piece of literature?
It's not my area of expertise. I've written all sorts of things for screen, but it's always been written originally for the screen. I would say in this particular context, I would think if you're making short films for the first time, if you write fiction, you should probably, my advice would be, and again, this is not my area of expertise, I would write something for the medium versus adapting the fiction that you've already written. Because if you've written a short story, you have great latitude. You can write about anything when you're writing fiction, but film is very limiting. You can write a short story that opens up on Signal Hill and then it cuts to the bow of a ship 20 years later. You can't do that in your short film that you're making for this festival. So I would maybe get inspired by a piece of fiction you've written, but realize that you're writing a short film and embrace that. Because my guess is most short stories can't really be adapted to a short film that's 2 or 3 minutes long. And that's what I would advise people to make. I think a lot of people think, oh, I'll make a short film. It'll be 17 minutes long. I don't know what the guidelines are for this festival, but don't do that, even if you're allowed. Keep it short, shorter than you probably are not contemplating. And because we're all consumers of television, and like we all think in 30 minutes and 7 minutes, but go with 3. That's my advice. So my advice would be, I guess, to reiterate, is take something you've written, but write an original film based on that versus an adaptation, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Thank you, Rick. And I want to continue with you for our next question. What do you think is the best way to enter the entertainment industry in general?
I'm loath to give you too much advice on this because the entertainment industry is so much different now than when I started. And there were opportunities that I had that you won't have, and there are certainly opportunities you have that I didn't have. So I'm not an expert on what an 18-year-old or 20-year-old should do. But I will say you have to do whatever it is you want to do. If you want to be a filmmaker, just start making films. If you want to be a writer, just start writing. And that means writing columns for your school newspaper or an online portal or wherever. You just got to do it. And if you want to be a playwright, start writing plays. Just start doing it. No one's going to call you up and ask you to write a play. This is what's so exciting about this process. And I'd like to go back, earlier we talked about deadlines. I think you should all be commended if you've committed to making a short film and you're sticking with the deadlines set out by the festival, because that's the only way I get things done too. And so I think that that's fantastic. And I think you just do it. And then if you want to be an actor, try to become a background performer on Hudson and Rex at least once or twice. I know it's not easy because there's union and all that business, but and help out on your friend's short film. That's the other thing people should do. Like, you're making your short film, find someone else who's making a short film, help them on their short film, and maybe do a different job, because you need to learn all the jobs.
Veronica, thank you so much, Rick. That was awesome. Veronica, I want to ask you the next question. What are some ways I can get my name out there so I can further my growing career in photography and film? Basically, how did you get in?
All right. Geez, I don't know that I I'm hesitant to give like, oh, this is the best way to do this. But there's all sorts of things that you can do. I would recommend going to the places where other people who do your art form are. So if you're a photographer, I'm not as into photography, I'm not as familiar with them, but if there's some sort of group of photographers in Newfoundland, maybe just like Google Newfoundland photography group and see if they meet up or if they have courses or anything like that. If you're interested in art, chatting with various artists groups, there's for film, we're talking about you could follow the Nickel Film Festival, the St. John's International Film Festival, NIFCO. They're always posting challenges or courses, workshops, and you can meet a lot of people there. And when you meet other people, you'll be able to make connections, learn a lot of stuff, and share ideas, figure out, oh, well, maybe somebody in Nickel is doing a film challenge and they're looking for somebody who can do lighting. Well, maybe you don't know anything about lighting, but it's a good opportunity to meet somebody. How I started out was mainly, again, I started out doing stand-up, so this is not as relevant for you at this age, but I went to bars and I just did a whole bunch of open mics. And by going to the open mics, I would meet other comedians and comedians who were maybe a little bit further in their careers. And then they would get me gigs on larger shows and just that sort of back and forth. But I would go to wherever your art form is. And if you don't know where those are, there's usually some resource group. The Writers Alliance of Newfoundland is another resource group. And you could just email them and ask them, I'm interested in breaking in. Who are some people who are, like, do you have any mentorships? Are there any workshops? Are there any gatherings where people meet and greets, anything like that? And just anything to kind of get a foot in the door, get your face known, get a little bit recognized. And at this point, I would also just work on your craft, on getting to learn the skills that you are wanting to put out there. Because it's one thing to have a foot in the door, but if you got a foot in the door and then you have no portfolio, I mean, that's not as great as it might be. But you know what, you will build up your portfolio, you'll build up your workload over time. So long as you keep working at honing whatever your craft is at the same time as you're trying to get your foot in the door, and not just working on getting your foot in the door because you show up and you're like, oh, I'm here, but I don't have anything. That can be a little bit awkward.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I kind of want to ask you about something that you said, because I mean, you both are working in comedy, right? And being in front of people, you know, if you say a joke and it doesn't land and you say you went on bars, like, where do you find the courage to stand in front of people? And, you know, where do you find that courage? I wonder. What was it for you?
For me?
Yeah, for example, yeah.
I've always had people, like friends and family, say that I was funny, and I was at a stand-up show at an open mic, and I said, man, I'm funnier than they are. If they can do it, I can do it. And that's literally it. We're talking about motivators. This is maybe not a very noble motivator, but sometimes when I see someone doing something and they're succeeding at something, and I'm like, man, I could do that better, that's a little bit motivating too. It's like, I want to be the one who's doing there. I can tell jokes. I can make that joke so funny. And so that was it. That's a little bit of courage from anger, I guess.
Okay.
But I love making people laugh, and it can be really hard. It took me a very long time to get even half comfortable in front of an audience. It took a long time. I just kind of had to work through it and say, I really, really want this. I really want to be a good comedian. I really want to tell jokes in front of people, and work through it. And it's hard, but at a certain point you're like, I've done this before. Oh, I didn't tell a joke. I told a joke and it wasn't that bad. Well, at least it's not as bad as the time I told that other joke. Whew. Like, so yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Rick, I want to ask you, this is more specifically, these are questions specifically about acting. Ways to find auditions or gigs, or just getting started as an actor in general. What would you advise?
Again, I'm not an expert on what a young person should do in 2021, but there are amateur theater companies in St. John's that do, and then all over the province, that do shows. There are, that's what you got to seek it out. And I don't know where the auditions are. I know that there will be auditions for short films and projects happening all the time. I mean, some of the people making these short films, what if someone writes a short film and you might want to cast your friends, but sometimes there's a part that one of your friends can't play. So they're going to have to go out and look for actors. I don't know, but you'll just have to keep practicing your craft and Google, I guess. Google is your friend.
Yeah, that is true. That is very relevant.
You know, they're gonna that's what you do. You Google it, and I'm sure there's Facebook groups for Newfoundland for this type of thing. But my advice would be create your own work. That's the best way to do it. And if you're in a community in Newfoundland and you're like, well, there's no theater company doing plays, well, why don't you look for a two-hander, one-act play, and then find a friend or someone, put an ad on Google and convince them to do this one-act play with you, a two-hander. Just you gotta start creating things, and that's the way you get noticed.
That's awesome. I want to continue with you. How do you we have a question from Sarah. How do you recommend actually producing the short film from someone who doesn't have any experience in videography?
Is that for me?
Yeah, it's for you.
Again, Google is your film, and YouTube is your friend, and YouTube is your friend, and the master classes that are available online is your friend. And most people who are film directors, when they decided to want to be a film director or film producer, they didn't know what they were doing. Believe me, you're not alone. And you get the advice from the people who are putting it out there. And if there's support groups, either in person or online, you get involved with them, and you do what they tell you. And I think that's all I can say.
So, I want to ask you.
Use your iPhone. I'm sure there are a million resources. that will teach you how to shoot a small scene with an iPhone with two people, so you don't cross the axis, and how to light it and do all that business. It's all the information is at your fingertips. I should also like just circle back for a second when it comes to auditioning. So many auditions now, and this is different, but like my friends who are actors, they're all doing their auditions at home on tape. That's what they're doing. So I would start practicing that as well. I would start practicing short monologues. I would start practicing small scenes and getting yourself on tape and getting used to doing that. I think that's probably really important.
Because I wanted to say, because what you said, how Google is our friend, we have a question here from Alex. Would you recommend studying film post-secondary? Is it worth the money, time? What do you think? Your honest opinion.
My honest opinion, and this is my honest opinion when it comes to anyone who wants to be an actor or a guitar player or a singer-songwriter or a filmmaker or any of these occupations, they can be incredibly rewarding occupations, but it's a difficult road. There's no doubt about it. So if there's anything else you can do that you're also passionate about, you might want to consider that, because you can always make short films. You can always act in amateur theater productions. You could always dabble in creating content. But if it's really what you're passionate about, absolutely, go to film school, 100%, if that's what you're passionate about. And you don't know where film school is going to lead you. I mean, I have a friend who's passionate about music, and she got a music degree, and now she's a judge because the music degree brought her to law, believe it or not. And she feels she's a better judge because she has a music degree. So you don't know at this point in your life, when you're starting your post-secondary journey, where it's going to lead you. But yeah, absolutely. Why not? You know, a friend of mine, Stephen Dunn, is a young Newfoundland filmmaker. And he came to Toronto where I was doing my show, and he went to film school, and he's got a tremendously rewarding career now. He's in New Orleans now shooting the new Queer as Folk franchise with a bunch of really big television stars. You know, it's very exciting, and he wouldn't have done that without film school, believe me. Although he made a lot of great short films.
Veronica, I'm going to give you the next question from Amy. What is something you wish you knew about comedy before you started?
I knew everything about comedy before I started. What's something that I wish I knew about comedy? That's a tough question. I think that just try things and is one of the things. It's okay to fail is one of the things that I wish that I had known earlier. I started doing stand-up when I was 25, and I'd wanted to do stand-up since I was probably 12 years old. But I always thought that's not for me. Like, that's for people who are on TV. That's for, you know, other people. And I just didn't think that that was an option. And even when I saw some of my friends from high school or people who were similar to my age doing stand-up around town, I just thought, well, it's not really for me. Like, I'm to this or I'm to that. I had body insecurity, so I was like, what are people going to say about that? Are they going to make fun of me? And I think that I would say, just if it's something that you're passionate about and it's something that you want to do and you've been thinking about it for like your whole life, or even it's something that's just like gripped you so strongly, just go for it. Like, the fear of failure can just eat you up and keep you from doing things that you really want to do. And it shouldn't, like, and that's not specific to comedy. I wish that it was a more specific answer, but that's something that I think I wish that I had known starting out, that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not be perfect, that no piece of art that you create in any medium ever is ever going to be perfect. You just got to do something that you like, that you put your everything into, and at the end of the day, that's got to be the reward. That's got to be what what motivates you and keeps you going. Like, yeah, you can't let a fear that something bad might happen or somebody might not like it or some anxiety in your head take over. You just gotta like work at the thing that you want to do, because it's so rewarding.
Awesome. I have a question here from Sarah. Do you have any advice on improv comedy? What kind of methods do you use to react as quickly as possible to any comedic scenario? Oh, that's a good question.
Is that for me or for Rick?
For let's say for you. Yeah, I want to hear your both.
No, let's go with Rick. I want to hear his response.
Oh yeah, go Rick.
Well,
yeah.
my response is going to be that I don't really have any insight on improvisational comedy. I've worked with lots of great writers and people who came up through improv comedy, lots of great comedians who came up through improv comedy, but I was not one of them. We never did improv. Sometimes we improv in the writer's room, but that's a completely different thing than being on stage. So I really, if that's your area of expertise, I commend you, but I don't really know enough about it to take up any more time. So I'll send it back to Veronica.
I do know a little bit about improv. I was part of a couple of improv troupes, and doing stand-up, sometimes you have to think on your feet a lot. So one of the things that is important about improv is that you have to work with your scene partners to create a scene that is interesting and dynamic. I find that sometimes with improv, people think that the comedy comes from people shouting at each other and shouting really loudly and just being angry at each other constantly. And that's not the real joy and comedy of improv. The real fun in improv is when you have two characters who like each other and then something happens between them. And so if you're interested in doing improv, there's a lot of great workshops that you can do and a lot of good films to learn about, but practicing your scenes with your improv team is critical, because when you have a trust between the improv actors, then you get to a point where you can sort of anticipate and play off each other. And it seems like the characters that you literally just invented seconds ago have been friends for 40 years, right? It's unfortunately, like a lot of things, it's about practice. I wish there was an easy answer, but you just got to practice and try and fail and learn from your mistakes.
I also know that there's a lot of rules when it comes to improv, which I didn't know. But knowing improv people, they would say, well, in improv, and they would go, but up. I'd be like, oh, that's a rule. They're like, oh, that's a rule. And you would think improv wouldn't have rules, but there's tons of rules. And so I guess you just, you got to learn those rules too. But I bet there's a lot of resources online and a lot of interviews with people who are tremendous. I'm sure I could find in 5 minutes Colin Mockery talking about improv comedy, and you can too.
Yeah, one of the big things for improv is, like Rick said, for rules, one of the probably the biggest, most famous one is yes and, which means that you accept the person's idea and then you add to it. So what's important there is, say somebody came up with, I'm a dog walker. You wouldn't say, no, you're not a dog walker. This is a bank, or you're a bank teller. You would say, yes, you're a dog walker, and I'm the dog. I don't know. And then, okay, now we've got a dynamic. Now we've got a scene potentially. And then that person will say, okay, this is the dog, and I'll accept that offer. And what else can you add? And that's how you build up improv scenes. But the yes and also that ties into sort of like characters accepting and liking each other, because we could do a 3-hour course just on improv, but let's just stick with yes and. Yes is accept what the other person has given you, and is add on to it to continue the scene.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that. I also wanted to ask you, let's see, I have a question here for Rick. Do you like talking to Canadians or Newfoundlanders the most?
I like talking to people, and it's
Or
led to the
Americans, I'm sorry.
oh
Canadians or Americans.
oh well, that's very different. That's a reference to Talking to Americans, which was a comedy series of comedy sketches that I did on This Hour's 22 Minutes, where I would talk to strangers on the street and grill them about Canadian issues and convince them that Canada hadn't legalized insulin yet, or that we only had 12 miles of paved road, or it went on and on and on. And that was not really, even though it was called Talking to Americans, it wasn't really talking, it was more tricking Americans and showing how gullible they were, or showing how little they knew about Canada. So that was one thing. But the vast majority of my career, I would say, I've been talking to Canadians, and that's more of a conversation. And that's one of the few skills I have. I feel like I'm good at talking to people. I'm good at listening to people. So by and large, I've enjoyed my time traveling Canada and shooting pieces in small town Canada, and shooting pieces with people on the job in Canada. And I prefer that. Although Talking to Americans, because it was wildly successful, it's a feeling that doesn't come along very often when you're on a hit comedy show and suddenly you have a segment on that hit comedy show that is a hit in itself. That's pretty wild. That doesn't happen very often, and I enjoyed every minute of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, you two. Any last comments, wishes you want to tell our students before we go on a break? Let's go with you, Rick.
I think it's great that this festival is happening. I think it's fantastic that you've committed, I believe you have, the people watching, to making a short film, and just go for it. Just go for it. Don't feel like you have to go to school and get a film degree all at once. Simplify your idea. It never hurts to simplify, and just go for it. And for some of you, I think it will be the beginning of a really rewarding adventure. And it's a really exciting industry. And unlike when I started out, I'm sitting here in Toronto, but right now there's people making films in Newfoundland and television series in Newfoundland, and there's actual jobs in the film industry, and it's an exciting industry to work in. And I hope that some of you might choose and decide to be part of the future, because it's a great industry. So congratulations to each and every one of you.
Thank you. And you, Veronica?
I've done a lot of challenge films for the festivals around Newfoundland, especially the Nickel Festival. And I've always found that the hardest part is just finding the motivation. Like you said, that you're going to do it, actually following through with it. And I just want to say, if you find something that creates a block, try to work through that, because it is so rewarding to work on a short film and have that at the end of the day. Even if it's not, even if you had like such big, huge ideas and you have to pare it down and cut it down to a fraction of it, it's still so rewarding to be able to have a film at the end of this. You will learn so much, and you can watch YouTube videos and you can Google things, and I definitely recommend that. But experience is so critical, and when you make it, you'll learn so many things that you would never be taught in a YouTube video or by Google. So push through, come up with your idea, get it filmed, edit it, put it together, and be proud of what you've done. It's challenging for sure, but it is so rewarding. And as Rick said, there's lots more opportunities in Newfoundland now than you would necessarily think. Opportunities to write, opportunities to direct, opportunities to work in film in various ways, act. So yeah, let this be an opportunity to just go for it and make something that you can be proud of.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for Veronica Dymond and Rick Mercer. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and in it, we're going to have, a 3-minute break. We're going to be back at 8, and we're going to have Justin Kelly. So be ready for that. See you in 3 minutes.